Middle East is no longer on the brink of war. It is currently being consumed by it. Jeffrey Sachs, the world-renowned economist and professor, has issued a chilling warning that the red button is now active. He describes the current situation as a fuse that has been lit, one that could lead to a catastrophic regional collapse or even the use of the ultimate weapon. On February 28, 2026, at 8 to 10 a.m. local time, Israel and the United States launched Operation Epic Fury. This was a massive, synchronized assault involving 200 fighter jets and 500 targets across Iran. The centerpiece of this operation was a devastating decapitation strike on a compound in downtown Tehran. Israeli intelligence, which had reportedly hacked Tehran's traffic cameras for 10 years, knew exactly where the Iranian leadership was meeting. This precision strike eliminated the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, along with 40 senior commanders, including the defense minister and top Revolutionary Guard officials. While President Donald Trump declared this a historic victory for justice, Jeffrey Sachs warns that the strategic logic is falling apart. Sachs points out that tactical superiority does not equal strategic success. He argues that the United States and Israel have cornered a wounded animal with nothing left to lose. Instead of a quick surrender like in Venezuela, Iran has activated its decentralized mosaic defense system. This doctrine, developed over decades, allows 31 autonomous provinces to continue the fight without a central command. The Iranian foreign minister has confirmed that military units are now in a weapons-free mode, acting independently and firing ballistic missiles at will. The retaliation was immediate and sweeping. Iran launched Operation True Promise 4, targeting United States naval bases in Bahrain and air bases in Qatar, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates. The busiest airport in the world in Dubai was forced to shut down indefinitely. As the smoke rises, Sachs warns that the United States has no exit strategy. The killing of a spiritual leader for 300 million people has not brought democracy, but instead has radicalized the entire region against the West. With no central body left in Iran to negotiate a ceasefire, the world is now staring down the barrel of a forever war that could force Israel to use its last resort. The red button is no longer a metaphor. It is a live possibility as the conventional battlefield becomes an uncontrollable nightmare of attrition and escalating costs. The global economy is currently suffering a double shock that Jeffrey Sachs describes as a catastrophic failure of American leadership. Within just hours of the initial strikes, the price of Brent crude jumped 13% in a single day. Analysts are now warning that oil prices, which have already surged 24% this week to $91 a barrel, could soon skyrocket to $120 or even $150. The primary reason for this economic terror is the de facto closure of the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway, which normally handles 20% of the world's oil supply, has seen traffic drop by 90% as Iran threatens to set any passing ship on fire. Major shipping companies like Maersk have suspended all crossings because the area has become a logistical black hole where ships cannot even get insurance. Sachs argues that this oil shock will lead to runaway inflation, weakening currencies, and hitting every American family at the gas pump and the grocery store. But the crisis extends far beyond the gas pump. A chilling new dimension has emerged as reports confirm that Russia is now providing Iran with real-time targeting intelligence using its massive space-based surveillance apparatus. 6 American service members were killed in a drone strike on a port facility in Kuwait, and intelligence suggests that Russian satellites tracked American assets to help Iranian drones find their mark. This transformation means that major adversaries have entered the conflict, turning a regional strike into a proxy war where Iran fights as a front for powers wanting to see America bleed. Sachs warns that the United States is currently too polarized and unstable to manage a conflict of this magnitude. He points out that President Trump bypassed Congress entirely, failing to provide any briefing or credible intelligence to the people's representatives before opening the door to war. This lack of domestic consensus is the fuse that Sachs says has been lit. While the White House claims to have a virtually unlimited supply of munitions and has surged 3 carrier strike groups into the region, the reality on the ground is a war of attrition. The Pentagon is already planning for a conflict that could last through September, despite public claims of a quick operation. As the military campaign cost reaches $11 billion in just the first 4 days, the world is beginning to realize that this misadventure has no clear endgame. Sachs's message is clear. The United States has lit a fuse that will have consequences in every region of the world, and there is no way it can achieve strategic objectives in its current state. The war has now entered a stage where the math of defense is working against the West. Iran has implemented what analysts call a drizzle strategy, launching drones and missiles at a slow but steady pace to force the United States and Israel to fire $1 million interceptors against $20,000 targets. In just the first 4 days, the United States military campaign against Iran may have cost close to $11 billion, with nearly $5.7 billion spent on missile interceptors alone. The Pentagon is now rushing to rebuild its stockpiles as these billion-dollar defense systems are being pressured by low-cost Iranian swarms. Jeffrey Sachs warns that the United States is burning through its treasury and national stability for a conflict that lacks a clear end date. This fiscal and logistical attrition is exactly what the Iranian regime intended when they activated their Mosaic defense, allowing autonomous units to sustain the fight independently after the central command was decapitated. While Israel and the United States claim to have destroyed 80% of Iran's air defense, the remaining ballistic missile arsenal remains a terrifying variable. With over 2,000 operational missiles, including the hypersonic Fatah series capable of reaching Mach 15, Iran maintains the capacity to strike any base or city in the region within minutes. The assassination of Ayatollah Khamenei was meant to end the regime, but it has only triggered an even more radical succession. Mojtaba Khamenei, the supreme leader's son, and a known hardliner, has been selected to take the helm. He is the man responsible for the massacre of 30,000 protesters and now leads a nation that views his father as a martyr for Shia Islam. Sachs observes that the American public is profoundly divided, with polling showing that 51% of Americans strongly disapprove of the military action. There is a growing fear that this is yet another war of choice with no exit strategy, mirroring the failures in Iraq and Afghanistan. Trump's insistence on unconditional surrender has effectively closed the door on diplomacy, leaving only the most violent options remaining. If the regime survives this wave of strikes, the United States will face the choice of a full-ground invasion or admitting a tactical failure. Sachs warns that this deadlock is where the red button becomes active. When conventional strategy fails and a regional conflict threatens to collapse the international order, the ultimate weapon is no longer a deterrent, it becomes the only way out. The humanitarian cost is currently fueling a fire that cannot be put out with more bombs. The strike on the girls' primary school in Minab has become a gruesome symbol of this conflict's brutality, where over 150 children and teachers were reportedly killed in a single afternoon. This is not just a military statistic, it is a strategic failure that has hardened the hearts of even those Iranians who once dreamed of a different government. Jeffrey Sachs points out that instead of liberating the people, the United States and Israel have created an unprecedented sense of unity inside Iran against a common enemy. This visible Gaza pattern of hitting schools and hospitals is leading to a psychological collapse not of the Iranian regime, but of international trust in Western morality. Diplomatically, the United States and Israel are standing almost entirely alone in this escalating nightmare. Even long-standing allies like the United Kingdom and France have publicly distanced themselves, with Prime Minister Keir Starmer calling the war unlawful and President Emmanuel Macron stating that France cannot approve or accept these actions. The United Kingdom even refused to allow the United States to use its bases at the start of the conflict, forcing B-2 bombers to fly 18-hour missions from the American mainland. This isolation is dangerous because it removes the traditional guardrails of collective diplomacy. Sachs argues that when a superpower goes rogue, bypassing the international community and its own constitutional laws, it creates an environment where the arbitrary use of force is the only remaining language. Inside the United States, the political situation is equally volatile. Donald Trump's approval rating has cratered to an unprecedented 27% according to some polls, with a clear majority of Americans strongly disapproving of the decision to attack Iran. Yet, the administration continues to release propaganda videos comparing massive bombings to football touchdowns, revealing a disconnect from the reality of the lives being lost. Sachs emphasizes that the United States itself is not stable enough to achieve its strategic objectives in the long term. If the decapitation strike failed to collapse the regime and the Mosaic defense continues to drain the American treasury, the conventional path is a dead end. This is why the strategic warning has shifted to the unthinkable. When the conventional machine fails to deliver victory, the red button is no longer a deterrent, it is being viewed as the only way out. The conventional military machine is hitting a wall of attrition that no one in the Trump administration anticipated. Jeffrey Sachs warns that the United States is currently in a state of deep instability, and this war has lit a fuse that could lead to global consequences. Despite the massive decapitation strikes that took out the supreme leader and 40 top commanders, the Iranian military has not collapsed. Instead, the activation of the Mosaic defense system has allowed 31 autonomous provinces to operate independently, keeping the missile and drone barrages constant. This decentralized approach has turned the conflict into a nightmare where the United States is running out of expensive interceptor missiles while Iran continues to fire low-cost projectiles. Reports indicate that critical American stockpiles for Patriot and THAAD systems are under severe pressure, forcing the Pentagon to hold emergency meetings with defense contractors to quadruple production. Sachs emphasizes that the United States itself is not stable enough to achieve strategic objectives in the long term. The political landscape is fractured, and the economy is reeling from the largest single-day rise in gasoline prices since 2022. With the Strait of Hormuz blocked and global oil markets in shock, the unconditional surrender demand by President Trump looks less like a position of strength and more like a dangerous gamble. Even as a third carrier strike group, the George H.W. Bush, enters the theater, the regional fallout continues to spread toward Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen. Sachs warns that this is a war of choice being fought without an exit strategy, leading to a scenario where conventional options are exhausted. When a nuclear-armed power like Israel feels its existence is threatened and its superpower ally is overstretched and divided, the threshold for the nuclear option lowers significantly. This is the terrifying logic of the red button being active. It is the result of a conventional strategy that has failed to account for the resilience of a civilization that has survived for 2,700 years. The strategic gamble has now moved from the battlefield to the very survival of the international order. The escalation matrix has reached a terminal point where the red button is no longer a theoretical deterrent but an active consideration. Jeffrey Sachs points out that the total failure of previous strikes to permanently destroy Iran's nuclear program proved that conventional bombing cannot solve this crisis. As Israel faces a relentless drizzle strategy designed to exhaust its interceptor stockpiles, the survival of the state is being weighed against the cost of total war. Iran's use of advanced decoys has successfully confused high-tech shields like the Patriot and Arrow systems, forcing the defenders to fire up to 6 missiles to down a single warhead. This fiscal and logistical attrition is pushing the strategic equation toward the nuclear option as a way to end a conflict that cannot be won through a conventional war of attrition. Jeffrey Sachs warns that the United States is currently fueling this fire by demanding an unconditional surrender that is historically impossible for a nation of 90 million people to accept. The decapitation of the supreme leader has only resulted in a more radical and defiant leadership under Mojtaba Khamenei, who carries the legacy of his father's blood. As the United States military burns through $11 billion in just 4 days, the strategic focus is shifting from regional stability to a desperate attempt to maintain national standing. Sachs emphasizes that the fuse lit in February 2026 will have consequences in every corner of the globe, as Russia and China move from the sidelines to active intelligence and logistical support for Iran. The red button is active because the traditional guardrails of international law and collective diplomacy have been dismantled by an administration doing whatever it wants without congressional consent. With the world's most critical oil choke point functionally closed and the global economy entering a state of shock, the conventional military path has reached its limits. Jeffrey Sachs' chilling warning serves as a final call to recognize that when the most powerful militaries on Earth are cornered by their own miscalculations, the unthinkable becomes the only remaining strategy. The world is not just watching a war, it is watching the potential end of the nuclear order.